Welcome back, everyone. It's the Designated Pundits. Today, we are previewing the 2024 season for Charlotte FC. Joined today by the one and only Willie P from Twitter. He works on WFNZ. Is that your radio station there?
Yes, that's our flagship station across our 3-statewide network.
Absolutely. The play-by-play guy for Charlotte FC. You hear him screeching into the mic when they score untimely goals. And he'll be joining us today to talk about Charlotte. Will, how you doing today?
I'm great, guys. Thank you so much for having me. Always great to talk soccer. I can't believe we're less than 10 days away.
It's wild.
I have a lot of shows to do. That's all I keep telling myself.
I didn't mean to put any more pressure on you, knowing that we got more for you guys left in the kitty.
I think we only have 3 left to schedule, and one of them is Toronto, who no one wants to talk about this year. But we are here today to talk about Charlotte, a team that had a pretty interesting 2023, to say the very least. Let's look at what they did on the field. 10, 13, and 11 in 2023, 9th in the East, grabbing that sweet last playoff spot. 45 goals scored, 52 goals against, leads them at a -7 goal differential. And they lost 5-2 to my Red Bulls in the first round of the playoffs in what I would call a blowout. Acted like they never saw a press before in their lives. Sorry, Will, I had to rub that in a little bit.
It's a little much.
So let's talk about it. 2023, how you feel?
I think 2023 was a lot of ups, a lot of downs, and kind of very uneven season just from Charlotte FC's perspective, because I think we all kind of felt good off of what happened in the Leagues Cup, the late run that they took there. Unfortunately, the loss to Inter Miami kind of left a little bit of a sour taste in the mouth, but I think that kind of represented a new kind of course correction for Charlotte FC. They got a couple of guys in the secondary transfer window in Scott Arfield and Yura Uranen that I think really made a big impact on their team down the stretch. But I don't know if they necessarily got themselves fully integrated because of the way that they were utilized by ex-head coach Christian Latanzio. I think the runs of draws definitely made things feel a bit uneven. And unfortunately, when you drop more points in winning positions than any team in Major League Soccer, it does provide you some kind of feeling like you left something out there that you couldn't quite obtain. And I think that's part of the reason why the club did go in a different direction with their head coach. I think there's a lot of renewed optimism, even with the outgoing players that left during the winter. And obviously, if you've seen social media today, you know that there's even more optimism that help could be very much on the way, if not right at the beginning of the season, then shortly thereafter. Because I think the one thing that, based on the way that the club has at least made their overtures during this offseason, is that they've got money to spend, and they're not willing to stand down to anybody in order to try and improve this club, because they feel like they have a pretty good core, and they also feel like they have the ability to make the next step happen with 2 open U22 slots and 2 open DP slots.
Yeah, that's how I kind of feel about Charlotte. You guys are not, blowing anyone away anytime soon, but they're competitive. They're going to be competitive in all games. And, at the end, that's really what we asked for. I had some more notes that they were hot and cold all year. They had only one game, Charlotte FC, between May 19th and August 26th of last year. That is a huge cold snap. That is a big problem. But they finished strong, 3-1-0 through the last 4 to clinch the playoff spot on decision day, the last spot there. So there were plenty of pluses last season in 2023. When you look at our contributors, we had Karol Swiderski, 12 goals, 5 assists. Enzo Copetti, 6 goals and an assist. Kerwin Vargas, 5 goals, 3 assists. Justin Miram, 4 and 3. Ashley Westwood, 3 goals, 2 assists. And Jazviak with 2 goals, 5 assists. Let's break down what we see here on the contributors chart.
Well, obviously, from Swiderski's standpoint, he was the class of the team a year ago. I think you definitely look at what he brought to the table as being kind of that talisman, somebody who had to play not just the number 9 spot, but also the number 10 spot when Enzo Capetti was in there. Capetti was injured for a lot of the middle part of the season, so that's why his numbers might look a little bit more diminished. Josviak, unfortunately, didn't live up to the billing that the DP slot had him kind of listed as. I feel like there's a kind of air of both of those parties, kind of both the club and him, feeling like they both wanted more. He also battled injury during the season. I think Justin Merrim was somebody who was a very nice surprise. Unfortunately for him, I think he got his goals in spurts. A couple of different games. He had one where he had a brace against Atlanta, and then a couple of other games where they happened in short order, and then other times you just didn't really feel him in a match. Kerwin Vargas, I think, is the big optimism coming into the offseason because of the way that he finished the season, getting goals, obviously, in the Inter Miami games, the last 2 of the regular season, and also scoring in the playoff game you mentioned. I think he's somebody who the club is very, very high on. There were some overtures during the offseason about potentially Kerwin being somebody who could be on the move, but I like the fact that the club looked at him as somebody who can still stick around and have an impact. And also over the summer, or over the winter, I should say, was part of a call-up to the Colombian Youth International team. So he's at least now garnering attention, not just with his club play, but also with his international play. And even a guy like Ashley Westwood, who I think we were very surprised coming off of the horrific injury that he had, that he was able to captain this team for as long as he did. And he had made mention going into the season that they wanted him to score more and kind of step up to the plate a little bit and be more of an offensive threat. He definitely scored some banger goals, including the one against Chicago that really kind of left everybody breathless at the end of that 2-0 victory. So I think that there's a lot to like from the guys who are returning, but I think there's also, more help on the way, not just from the folks who have been rumored today, but also from the folks who are coming up from Crown Legacy. I think you can't look at the entirety of Charlotte FC's season and leave out the fact that their reserve team won the Eastern Conference, didn't get the ultimate payoff in the postseason, but they've already added 2 players, one on the outfield and one in the goalkeeper slot, to be on that first team with Joao Pedro and Totoro Adunze, and there's a rumor that 2 more at least could be on the way with Yuri Tavares, who packed 12 goals in the MLS Next Pro campaign a year ago, and the multi-million-dollar transfer man Niko Petkovic, who I think many believe is one of the midfielders of the future for this club, and of course maybe even the present.
Love it. Now, we're going to go into incoming and outgoing players, but I did want to highlight, something that, the other Dean Smith, the head coach of the soccer team, Dean Smith, not to be confused with the head coach of the basketball team down in Charlotte for years, legendary coach there. Very interesting thing he said to me during a press conference earlier this year, and it was something along the lines of, these aren't my designated players. Like, make it known that they were not brought in, under his regime, and that things were going to change. Well, you could say that again because he shipped a couple guys out within the first few weeks. Let's talk first about the outgoing players, and then we'll talk about some of the new signings and be a little optimistic about the future, because you guys did let go of 2 DPs, the wrong chart, Bob, in Karol Swiderski and Kamil Josviak. I believe Josviak was a DP, right?
He was.
So two DPs out of Charlotte, and kind of not a rebuild, but quite a bit of shuffling. Derek Jones, Mackenzie Gaines, Harrison Awful, all outgoing. Talk to us about how that affects the team.
So the DJ and McKenzie, I'll start with those 2 guys just because we didn't talk about them earlier, but those 2 guys outgoing, I feel bad that it didn't work for either of them in the end. I think DJ was a player who I think in our first season we really liked, especially because of his ability to be kind of an enforcer in the midfield. He brought a different tenacity in Charlotte that he unfortunately just did not show in his other stops, Houston and Nashville most notably. But I understand, obviously, with him going an opportunity to play for, the defending champions, they're very, very happy with him, and we wish him the best of luck. Unfortunately, I think under the previous manager, they really didn't see eye to eye on his role in terms of what they wanted to do with him. They pushed him a lot more forward in the second half of the season, and I don't know if that necessarily fit his skill set all the best. With Mackenzie Gaines, he's somebody who is fast as all get out, and just never really put the final product together. He unfortunately took a bit of an injury spell in the middle part of the year too. So I'm hoping that Nashville brings him at least a little bit of a change in scenery. He was one of our earliest signings, came over in the expansion draft from Austin. So at least from that aspect, you look at him and you see a lot of potential there from him. Josviak is somebody who early in the winter, Dean Smith basically identified the fact that they wanted a different profile on the wing. They want somebody who has a little bit more pace on the wing and has the ability to not only cross the ball in, but also dribble it in as well. I think that Camille's profile is a bit different than what Dean was looking for. They want someone there who can maybe be a little bit more of a technical player than what Josviak is. Josviak was great as a two-way winger, but I don't know if he was somebody who you're going to think about and find that there's going to be technical brilliance with him. So I'm hoping that his time in Granada at least yields a little bit more than his time at Charlotte FC. And as far as Carroll goes, I think we were all kind of under the impression that once we saw Carroll get on the plane back to America, that he was going to be with the club. He had been somebody who, even as early as the middle part of last year, had made some intonations about wanting to go to Europe. But he basically said that's something that could be in the offing, down the line. But I'm here now and I'm focused on the present. And then, basically he approached the sporting department and said, look, I want to make and pursue this move to Hellas Verona. It's on a loan, so there is still the possibility that he can come back and play for Charlotte FC. If Verona stays up in in Serie A, then there is at least the potential that he can come back potentially on a non-DP deal. But I think we all kind of know that if you're making a loan for a DP, it's more than likely going to result in a sale. So I do feel like it's something where they wanted to at least grant him that move, and it obviously gives Charlotte FC a lot more roster flexibility. As I mentioned before, it opens up the other two U22 slots that they can use. They already feel like they have one tagged for Nikola Petkovic, who I mentioned earlier. They feel like they have the ability to potentially use one more. There's a player that's rumored out of Uruguay who could be potentially ticketed for that slot, an attacking midfield spot in Franco Gonzalez. And it also allows you the ability to sign two DPs and kind of have a similar roster structure than you had in the early part of the first season, where you're able to have a young DP and two senior DPs when they had Jordi Alcivar and Karol Swiderski, along with Kamil Josviak manning the up top scenario. So at least in this sense, Charlotte FC's roster can maybe even get a little bit deeper based on either some of the rumored moves that happen and come to pass, or just in terms of having those openings, what they can use to fill them with.
Absolutely. That's one of the hard things about doing these prediction videos, is that there's still some time to get these rosters across. I know we just did LA Galaxy last night, and they signed Paint Sill today. The young African player, which would have been great for the video. So just for everyone watching, this is February 14th. It is Valentine's Day. These are what we think is going on right now, and we're going to talk about some incoming players because you guys were busy. Brought in Scott Arfield, Breck Dejaguer, that was at the end of last season, Jabril Diani, and David Bingham to help out that goalkeeper room in the back. Is there reason to be excited about these signings?
Well, Bingham's somebody who I feel like will provide depth for a goalkeeper room that lost Pablo Cisniega during the offseason and also lost Isaac Walker, who was a depth keeper for us, to an injury. He's going to be out for at least a little bit here, so it provides a veteran voice inside that room. I still feel like George Marks is the person who is going to be the primary backup. Maybe Bingham acts as your third keeper who travels but doesn't necessarily see the field. And it also allows some of the younger keepers like Chituro Odunze to get more reps at Crown Legacy, because while he's somebody who brings a lot of promise to the table, I think they want to see more minutes underneath him before they give him a try at the first team. It doesn't really serve Odunze well to be, traveling as either the third keeper or the second keeper and not getting minutes with Legacy. So I think from that aspect, they are at least better served utilizing him in that fashion. Breck Diahare is somebody I did mention earlier, and he's somebody who I think blew hot and cold a lot of times because, and again, this is going to sound like a broken record, because of misuse. I think the big identifier for Christian Latanzio, and this is going to sound overly critical, but he put guys in positions that weren't necessarily their suited potential. I mean, there was one game where he put Brant Bronico as a left back. Brant Bronico is a defensive midfielder at the very best and could maybe even play up as an 8, but left back is something that wasn't necessarily in his skill set, and he's one of my favorite players. So I felt kind of weird when I saw him play in that role against Atlanta United, and Caleb Wiley scored a brace against him. So I think Diahare is somebody who they tried to plug on the wing. I think he's better more centrally as kind of a number 10. That's part of the reason why the sporting department gave him the number 10. And I think he's somebody who at least can fill that role until they either sign a DP attacking midfielder or potentially provide some much needed depth at that position, or even also be the man if he ends up producing at that level. Arfield's somebody who literally the man's got goals in his pocket. He just floods goals, especially coming off the bench. I'll be curious to see how Dean Smith utilizes him early in the season, whether he tries to start him more to try and get him going, or whether or not he does use him as a super sub off the bench. And there are also obviously some other signings. You mentioned Jabril Diani, who I think can be a very nice piece as a defensive midfielder, also can slide in at center back. The one thing that Dean Smith has said is that he wants to get somebody who is a left-footed center back to pair on the other side of Adilson Malanda, because he does feel like that can be the big part that solidifies that back four. And obviously trying to replace what you have on the wing on the right side with the departure of Josviak, mentioning, of course, the rumor that came about earlier on Wednesday, which is the fact that Luciano Rodriguez could potentially be moving from South America to potentially the United States with Charlotte FC. That's obviously still in the advanced talk stages. I know that he's had overtures with River Plate as well as the Dutch League as well. So while that's not finalized, and it could be looking silly by even talking about it now if it doesn't come to pass, that is at least the direction. They're trying to get somebody on that wing that is of a high price. Albert Grunbach was the player that they targeted earlier in the winter, did not come to pass. He ended up staying in Norway, but I think that's what they're looking for, but more technical ability, somebody who can be a nice foil to Vargas to take some attention away, and obviously somebody to take attention away from Capetti, because they can build a lot of their offense around Enzo Capetti. And I feel like the biggest problem a year ago, why they didn't really unlock the most out of Enzo Capetti, is that him and Carroll wanted to occupy a lot of the same spaces. Carroll saw himself as an in and out striker. He didn't really necessarily feel like he was a number 10 type profile player. They both were kind of trying to fight for that role, and there was this constant narrative a year ago of how can these guys coexist together, and it ultimately just didn't really work. So Enzo has looked a lot different over the course of this season. I know it might sound like a cliche where it feels like he might look like and sound like and feel like a brand new signing, but I think you're going to see a much more renewed Enzo Capetti in 2024 than you might have thought you were going to see with him a year ago.
Will, that's interesting that you say that, because one of the things I was like thinking about in relation to Charlotte is I just saw Matt Doyle put out his power rankings, right? Now, take that for what it is, and what it isn't. But he ranked Charlotte pretty low.
He did.
Yeah, just above Toronto and Austin. So I guess my question is, do you feel like this team has addressed holes, improved the roster? Do you feel like, I'm guessing that Matt, Doyle ranked it a lot based off of losing Karol Swiderski. But do you feel like this team has improved in any way? Do you think they're in a position to replace his production? Do you think they're better off?
I mean, anytime you lose a player of Karol Swiderski's quality and there isn't an immediate replacement available on the roster, it's hard to look at it and say it's an improvement. I mean, this is not addition by subtraction. I'm not trying to sit here and say that Karol Swiderski was a problem or anything of that nature. I just feel like they had two players who were strikers who both wanted to play striker. And I think that's the big issue when you looked at Charlotte FC's roster construction, is that they were giving two DP slots for guys who played the same position. And now there's a lot of people who are sitting there and saying, well, why isn't Charlotte FC going out and getting another striker? Well, they've got a striker in Enzo Capetti, and they've got another one who they've homegrown and developed in Patrick Ajiman, who they believe is either the striker of the future or somebody who can at least be instant offense off the bench, and somebody who really came on strong in games a year ago. He scored a big goal against Seattle, scored a goal in the postseason. So, I mean, there's a lot to bring to the table that you like from the striker position. The unfortunate part about it is they haven't replaced that right wing yet, and whether or not that happens over the course of the next couple of weeks or not, I think remains to be seen. They have until April. At least they feel like they at least have some time to develop that over the course of the next couple of weeks before the end of the primary transfer window. And then if they still haven't signed a third DP, then they can take care of that over the summer. I do feel like from Dean Smith's perspective, the change in manager at least provides you the ability to feel like you have a newness and a new face on that roster that at least gives you an ability to maximize that group a lot better. The one thing that he's talked about a lot is wanting to give guys positional freedom. That wasn't something that they felt a lot of a year ago under Christian Lattanzio. Lattanzio wanted to play a system that was based on the Citigroup model, where they wanted possession and possession, to the max, so to speak. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times Charlotte FC was trying to find ways to dribble the ball literally into the goal, as opposed to taking shots and even delivering shots on target. I think Dino is a lot more pragmatic. I think he's somebody who, one of his big cliches that he's used over the course of this spring is said, don't make a good chance better. I think he wants guys to shoot the ball. And I think you're going to see a lot more of an attacking presence. The one thing that I have wanted to see more during the preseason, and I'm wondering if we'll see that on Saturday, is more of an attention to possession and at least what I would call intentional possession. But I do feel like while it's hard to project a better output based on the players that they've lost, I know they're working to replace them, and I think they feel pretty good about the ones that are on the roster, that you'll get a better output out of those guys than you might have had last season under a different coach.
Now, you may not want to hear this, but if I had to put my rankings out right now, I would probably be more critical than Doyle would even be, because when I look at this, I see holes everywhere now. This was, with the help of Ben Wright from Nashville down there, who has an amazing chart. Go over to his Twitter. It's like at Ben Wright. You can just Google Ben Wright and find it. And he has like depth charts of every team, and he has them colored like as average, an average player is green, an above average player is blue, a bad player is red, and stuff like that. And we use his pretty accurate depth charts a little bit on this show. And I just, there's an issue. Right wing doesn't look good. Talk first about the attack, and then I guess we'll move back towards the midfield.
Yeah, the right wing scenario obviously is still very much up in the air. I know you have Ben Bender up there just because of that's where he finished the season, but he's still not going to be available to start the year because of the offseason knee surgery that ended his 2023 prematurely. So right wing is very much a question mark. They've put a bunch of different guys in there, including the first-round draft pick Tiger Smalls, who actually just signed his first professional contract today. They've thrown the 15-year-old Nimfasha Berkimas, who was incredible at the U17 World Cup, but again, he's a 15-year-old. The man can't even drive yet. So it's a scenario where that they're obviously banking on hope in that position. I do feel like the other midfielder next to Debril Gianni might very well be Niko Pekovic. They've also seen Junior Urso, the former Orlando City midfielder, acting as a trialist during his time so far during the preseason. So if that signing comes to pass, I'd expect maybe Urso to slide in and potentially be alongside Westwood to start the season before getting Petkovic up to speed, or maybe Petkovic comes in right away. No, not necessarily sure. I think Diahare probably is the starter at that 10 position. Also mentioned the fact when you're talking about trialists, Tariq Fosu, who used to play at Brentford, is also somebody that they've kind of cycled in at the wing position. And as far as the back line goes, I look for Milanda to play on that right side, and I think the left center back position, barring a potential addition, could be Jabril Diani, or it could potentially be the number 1 overall pick from a year ago, Hamady Diop, who, again, kind of fell out of favor from the previous head coach. He can play center back, or he can play fullback. Or potentially also, as you mentioned, Bill Tuiloma. They want to have somebody with more of a left foot. The other option could be also somebody who was an MLS Best 11 defender in Joao Pedro. So I understand that for a lot of people, yourself included, you look at this from the standpoint and say this doesn't jump off the page to people who don't follow Charlotte on a day in and day out basis. But one of the things that Dean Smith has at least sat there and said is that he has looked at guys who a lot of people haven't necessarily seen en masse that he really, really likes. And I'll lean on Dean's experience in terms of trying to figure this out. One of the things that he has said is that if you're good enough, you're old enough. So that's why he hasn't been shy about using Joao Pedro with the starting units. He hasn't been shy about putting Nimfasha Berkimas out there as a starter. Scored another goal today against Phoenix Rising. So while, again, it's not going to win you off-season headlines, it's not going to get you high up in power rankings, they're banking on the fact that people are going to look at Charlotte FC come April and June and say, where the heck did they come from? And they're hoping that they're banking on doing so with some of their homegrown talent.
All right. Thank you. The depth chart is still very much in flux. February 14th, we're just doing the best we can. In the next 30 days, this is going to be, drastically different here. The best we can for now. We got to move on, and let's finish up with some 2024 predictions. What are going to be the strengths of Charlotte?
I think the strengths that you will have, like I said before, is there will be a lot more freedom. I do feel like we're going to see a lot of different permutations of the lineup early. So I think one of the things that they're trying to do is create depth because of the fact that they are going to play a lot of guys who maybe didn't see action with them a year ago. And I also think the one other thing you're going to see out of them is that they're really trying to make sure that they don't repeat the sins of a year ago. It's no secret, like I mentioned before, 25 points dropped from winning positions a year ago. It's something that the team does not want to repeat. And I know that there's been a lot of a concerted effort to making sure that those things don't return from Charlotte's perspective. Investments in the back line, like I said, and trying to bring in a guy like a Jabril Diani, bringing in a guy like a Niko Pekovic. They want to make sure that they are stronger through the midfield. And one other thing, too, that Dean Smith said is that one of the real problems and bad habits that Charlotte FC developed over the course of last year was that everything came from the outside. Even a lot of times, Enzo Capetti found himself on the wing trying to cross balls in. They want Enzo to be, in between the boxes. They want Enzo to be very much centrally, and they want him to be fed not just from the outside on the wing, but also through the midfield as well. They want to empower their midfielders to be a lot more forward-thinking and be players who can not only press the issue, but also be active on the counter press as well. I think you're going to be a much better team with Charlotte FC in the counter press than you were a year ago. One of the things that Charlotte FC unfortunately could not do a lot is in situations last year when they could not regain possession, they had to sustain and suffer a lot, especially late in games. I think that's something that's going to be a real part that Dean Smith focuses on to try and improve in 2023 because 2024, I should say, because as we all know, possession is 9/10 of the law.
All right, 2024 storylines. Here I try to pick a couple things that we should keep an eye on throughout the first half of the season. First one is, Charlotte was rumored to have a rejected bid up to $9.5 million for a player whose name I am going to guess is Gronbach.
Albert Gronbach, yes.
Great. I got one right. You see that, Scott? I got one right.
Good guess. Mark this in your journals, guys. This is a landmark day for Bob.
My question is going to be, do they spend that somewhere else? We've heard of rumored signings, but that was a huge deal, bid that was rejected. Are they going to go out and spend huge on someone else?
Well, if the rumors are true with Luciano Rodriguez, they're even going to surpass that number on Gronbach. The number that I saw earlier today from the transfer fee was $12 million, which would make it a top 5 transfer in the history of Major League Soccer. I think the team that he plays for down in South America is asking for 17, so they can split the difference between those two after he's already rejected a bid in Holland and already rejected a bid at River Plate. That would be an amazing signing and definitely do a lot to buoy the spirits and the chances for Charlotte FC in 2024. They've not been shy about what they want to spend, guys. Like, that's the one thing. A lot of times these things take two to tango. I think going after Gronbach, he is definitely a player of high regard, but I even thought that some of the rumored I think they got all the way up to $10.5 million with him. I don't know if he's a $10.5 million transfer player, especially for somebody who's never played outside of Norway. So I feel like that's a situation where they're willing to go after it, but you also got to have.
But it offers intent to me.
Yes,
right. It offers that intent, and I think that matters more than the actual signing.
That's the point. Is that's exactly what my point was going to be. Is the fact that they're willing to even go out there and spend that kind of money, at least tells you what they want to do and what kind of intention that they have. And make no mistake about it. I know people will sit there and say David Tepper's got all this money, he can afford it. He wants to win, and I think that's a scenario that you're seeing a lot more with the intention. I think you also saw it with the investment that they made in the sporting department by adding Tommy Wilson from Philadelphia Union. That was something where, if you ask Philadelphia fans, they were very, very sad to lose him as a technical director. He's somebody who's going to, I think, provide a lot of stability to making sure that the product at the academy level, the legacy level, and at the first team is all somewhat in alignment. And also, he can at least add different contacts that Soren Cornetta, the sporting director, GM, might not have as well. So I do feel like there is intent to try and make that happen. Just the fact that they've been in these conversations with these type of players. I mean, a guy like Luciano Rodriguez, who basically won the Under-20 World Cup for Uruguay, that's something you look at and say, that's the kind of player you want to get as a young DP. I'm not saying that he's going to be Thiago Almada, but he's at least somebody who, like you said, it shows intent and it shows that they want to get better.
All right. Speaking of getting better, the defense, conceding some of these goals, dropping points from winning positions, that was a problem last year.
Mm-hmm.
How do they improve this year?
I think it's just more organization and a different kind of organization when it comes to players, like I said, being in more ample positions to be able to defend. I think the biggest issues a lot of times last year was that the sub patterns and the subs were made in scenarios with guys not necessarily used to defending. Again, there's a lot of fluky stuff that happened a year ago. A guy takes an unfortunate foul in the box against Nashville. Couple other late goals that don't go their way. I mean, unfortunately, it was Murphy's Law a lot of times last year for Charlotte FC from a defensive aspect. George Marks, unfortunately, has an unfortunate gaffe at the end of the game against Colorado. So there are, I think, some regressions to the mean, or progression to the mean, I guess you could say, in terms of results that maybe should have gone Charlotte FC's way that didn't. I know that there's definite intention on trying to make things better. I do feel like a different center back pairing will definitely help that if they can get a left side center back to be more consistent with Adilson Milanda, because that was the big issue I think a year ago, is that they couldn't find a consistent back line to really hang their hat on a year ago. They had guys in and out with injury. They didn't really have a bona fide left back until Yara Oronen stepped in, and that was not until around the Leagues Cup scenario that really got themselves going. So I think now that they've got a left back that's going to be somebody you put in ink every day. I think Nathan Byrne is the put in ink right back with obviously a lot of push from Jalen Lindsay behind him. And I think you put Milanda in there on the right center back position. And until you get that left center back spot held down, I think that's going to be something that, with intention, Charlotte FC will at least get better, because, as my colleague Jessica Charman likes to say, you're not doing yourself any favors with constant changes in the back four.
Definitely.
I love it. Let's skip ahead to next October. Let's say you guys are top 4 spot in the Eastern Conference. What went right? What has to go right for you to find yourselves there?
They found a right winger that's going to be the best player that they've seen, and somebody who's going to be the kind of guy who, if you do a 10th year anniversary team, he's the first entry onto that list. Enzo Capetti has a 15-goal season, and Dean Smith is probably MLS Coach of the Year, because that would obviously signal to me that they got the hire right. I know that talking as the broadcaster for Charlotte, I might look at things in maybe black and blue colored glasses, but I look at the hirings that were made over the course of the offseason, and I'd take our guy over any of the other signings that were made. I know there were a couple other guys who I felt like can really have success. I don't know why Red Bulls, for example, didn't keep Troy Lesane. I was very, very frustrated by that particular lack of appointment, but I very much think that he's going to do good things in D.C. I think Frank Lopez is a good manager at Chicago, and I'm happy that Phil Neville got himself a second chance up in the Cascadia part of the country. But I'd take Dean Smith over any of those guys, because I feel like Dean's experience, and I think his ability to develop young players and develop players overall, is going to be what is the difference in Charlotte FC maximizing their output in 2024.
The famous Willie P here to talk to us about Charlotte FC. Thank you so much for taking the time out tonight to come and talk with us. Any final thoughts, final words? Let us know where we can find your work.
We can find me at Willie P Style. You can find our podcast, which you do on Charlotte FC, at Crown Corner, wherever you get your podcast. We're going to have our first podcast kicking off, I believe, the Monday after the first game. So be sure to look for Jess and I on that, and obviously on the broadcasts on WFNZ and across the Charlotte FC radio network. Thank you, guys.
If you guys are tuning in, make sure you find our other 28 team previews. We're going in, we are bringing in specialists, podcasters, play-by-play announcers from each and every of the 29 Major League Soccer teams. We'll be concluding that near the end of this week. i80sports.com, youtube.com/i80sports, or search the Designated Pundits wherever you listen. Will, thank you one last time for being here, and thank you everyone at home for watching.